Hello, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to Satsang. Satsang is an ancient spiritual practice from India. It means being in reality together. I give Satsang live every Wednesday and Sunday night in Portland, Maine. This Dharma talk was recorded during one of our Wednesday night gatherings. Please visit jayakula.org to learn more about the teachings. You can find video satsangs on Jayakula's YouTube channel, and my books are all available on Amazon.com. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. So there's been a request for me tonight to talk about the relationship between seated practice and integrated practice. Seated practice is, of course, stuff we do while sitting somewhere, usually in our tradition on a cushion in front of an altar or somewhere in a special practice space, and including all the kinds of things we do like mantra and meditation and Kriya Yoga, those kinds of practices. And then integrated practice is everything else. And in fact, even seated practice can be integrated practice depending on what's going on. You might have to integrate with noise on the street or less than ideal conditions in your practice space or your mind. Integration means, very simply, bringing the state of your practice into every activity. Our goal as practitioners is, of course, not to feel one way on a meditation cushion and then feel our normal tensions everywhere else. If that was the case, no one would continue this practice. So our goal is actually to discover reality, to discover our real nature. And we can talk about that in many different ways, but every practice that we do, whether it's puja or hatha yoga or Ayurveda or mantra or Kriya Yoga or Guru Yoga or meditation, every practice has exactly the same eventual fruit, which is that we recognize and begin to be able to directly explore what I call living presence. So living presence is a quality, among many other things, of alive awareness that is pervasive everywhere and that has virtues such as curiosity and intelligence and compassion, among others, and which is wisdom itself. So when we start to first just recognize that, hey, I'm not just a little object here in space, and space is not just something between me and you. There's actually a feeling here that there is aliveness, and we begin to contact that in our practice, and it can be contacted in many, many different ways, but eventually the difference between it being here or being here starts to erode, and we start to have a continuous and full experience of that living presence, of the aliveness and the awareness of everything. Now, we can have a very shallow experience of that, and we can have a very intermittent experience of that. And usually that's the case when you first start doing consistent practice. You know, your first experience might be just some little experience of feeling less certain that you are only this, right? Mantra can do that because mantra causes us to feel more porous, more connected to it. It causes us to experience more the exchange between ourselves and the environment. That's why we often start with mantra practice. So we can kind of get glimpses of things and they go away, and then we get more than glimpses, and then we start to explore more what this is. We start to immerse ourselves in that, or we start to integrate our own sense of individualized awareness with that awareness that we perceive initially to be outside of ourselves. So the first kind of integration is integrating your own sense of individualized awareness with that more pervasive awareness. But we can only do that very intermittently. I like to use the example of cooking. When we make food or we eat food, we get the taste of it on our tongue. And then we can recall it, right? So even though we might only have intermittent experiences of this more expansive, pervasive aliveness, we can still, by repeatedly tasting it through our everyday practice and through our teacher and through teachings, we can get the taste of it in us. We can get the feel of it in us. We can find our way to it. Right now, most of you can probably bring on some memory or sense of the taste of chocolate. Or another example I like to use is, if you like to cook, everybody who cooks and likes to cook has this experience. You're in the supermarket getting food for dinner, and you're kind of imagining how different ingredients are going to taste together. And you have this innate sense based on experience. And so you're kind of making this recipe as you go down the aisles. Well, it's the same thing with the taste of living presence. You repeatedly dip into it. You repeatedly taste it. You repeatedly integrate yourself with that while you're doing seated practice. And then when you're out and about, you can remember it. You can bring it back on. And you can remember it with your body, with your energy, and your mind. When we are doing practice and we're having fruit from that practice, we start to experience an opening of the gates of our body, energy, and mind. And at first it feels like kind of ordinary relaxation. In general, for people, that's their first experience of it. But then as we go along, we start to notice that it's not just ordinary relaxation, that we're actually opening these gates of subtle communication between ourselves and everything else. And it becomes this grand adventure, really, right? And this incredibly rich communicative situation. So we start to get like body, energy, mind memory of that. We start to be able to find our way back to that. And this is what integration means. Integration means you're out and about and you drop into the state of your practice. This is the way that we talk about it. Right? You first have to remember to do that. That's hard. So one of the reasons we do seated practice, and not the only reason, is because a lot of the rest of the time we're very distracted. So if we sit down on a cushion, then we can focus on mantra or on meditation, and we can get more fruit because we're experiencing more of it. We're not distracted by thinking about work, hopefully, but we are sometimes. But in any rate, we have more of a chance of experiencing the fullness of that practice. And then as we go along, we can get into a very deep conversation with our practice. We can get into a very deep exploration of consciousness and energy, of that primordial intelligence and creativity and curiosity with our own energy, our own minds, our own bodies. It just becomes this very multifaceted and nuanced experience. And for most of us, we have to be relatively still and paying attention to it in order to be experiencing those things. But then as we go along, we begin to be able to relax the gates of body, energy, and mind anywhere we are. The trick, though, is that our distraction, the karmic distractions that we experience, are a form of forgetting. They are forgetting itself. And what we're forgetting is our real nature. So we're forgetting that we actually are this pervasive living presence, that we are an aspect of that we're connected in this hugely communicative situation of beauty and wonder and curiosity and this intelligence beyond all intelligence that we can imagine in our ordinary minds. We forget all that because we're more interested in what someone's saying on Facebook or something like that. It's almost harder to remember to integrate than it is to actually integrate. And we have all kinds of tricks to help us to remember to do that. And sometimes we tie vow strings to remember to integrate when we're out and about. It's said in this tradition that spiritual practice that you remember to do when you're out and about is 10,000 times more effective than the practice you do on your meditation cushion. Why? Not because there's anything magical about out and about, but it's because you remembered in a situation where you would have normally forgotten. The act of remembering to be in the state of your practice is very, very powerful. Right. And that's actually where the effort has to be applied. So once you get enough of a feeling for this livingness of everything and the feeling of the gates of your body, energy, and mind relaxing and entering into that continuous communicative situation, then you can find your way back there over and over and over again when you're out and about. And the effort is to remember to do that. Integrate, that instruction is a pointing out instruction. There is no way to actually tell you, here are the 5 steps you need to take in order to integrate your awareness and your experience of body, energy, and mind with everything else. No one can tell you how to do that. But your practice, your seated practice, teaches you about what integration feels like, and then you can find your way back there. You have to have, though, an open exploratory orientation toward that process. Right? You have to understand that it's possible, and you have to be excited about and desirous of trying it out, seeing what you can do. My Dzogchen teacher always says, integrate your awareness with that. And of course, no one knows what that means, really. I mean, if we're talking in ordinary human terms, the ordinary life, what do you mean integrate my awareness? What the heck does that mean? But when you're sitting there and you're encountering this awareness, you will be taught by it how to do that. As long as you keep opening yourself to that, it will tell you what to do. Not in a sentence, but in a kind of a way that it reaches out to you and touches you, and it shows you that it is your own self. It is you. You are an aspect of it. It is an aspect of you. You are continuous with that. It teaches you that. And then at that point, you understand that the only thing stopping you from integrating is your habit of experiencing yourself as a separate being. It's a habit that's very hard to break. But luckily, you don't have to take a sledgehammer to it. All you need to do is do sadhana consistently every day, and eventually it just naturally goes in that direction. Right. Still, in this kind of tradition, we have 3 basic kinds of things that we're doing in sadhana. We're trying to recognize our real nature, recognize flowing presence. It's called many, many different things in many traditions. So flowing presence, instant presence, Rigpa, Shiva nature, Christ consciousness, Buddha nature. Anandamayi just called it that. But whatever it is, it's what everything is made out of, and it's what everything is arising from. And it's been recognized by millions and millions of practitioners it's probably since anybody started doing spiritual practice. It is your own nature, so it's in your nature to be able to recognize it. And there are basically 3 they aren't steps because they don't necessarily happen sequentially. They may happen all at once, but first you have to recognize that. You have to recognize that alive, aware presence. Then you have to practice to remain recognizing that. And again, you may recognize it like for a second. You're like, whoa, what was that? I like to tell the story of one of my students who started doing open-eyed meditation every day. And then she would have this experience that someone was in the room with her, and she would get kind of freaked out. That was her first experience, like the sense that there's something there. And then, So recognizing it and then becoming established in that recognition and then integrating that so that every aspect of your life, you are naturally recognizing the real nature of everything. Right? So these are just the fundamentals of the process of waking up. And integration is something that we practice from the beginning. In some other kinds of traditions, you get relative teachings first and then absolute teachings, or you get, certain kinds of practices, like beginning practices, and then eventually they tell you what it's all about later down the road. In this kind of tradition, a direct realization tradition, the teaching method is the opposite of that. Abhinavagupta, the Siddha who sort of synthesized this tradition from a bunch of other traditions in Kashmir, he said, go to the most direct, what he said highest, but it's not really highest, it's just the most direct practice first. And if that doesn't work for you, then fall back and do something that gives you more support. And if that doesn't work, fall back and give something that gives you even more support. So we always, from the beginning, practice in a way that might, for some people, help you to instantly recognize the alive, aware situation that you're in. And then you can use that as a beacon and go on from there. And for other people, it takes other kinds of practices and much longer. But we're always doing those direct realization practices like Guru Yoga and transmission and other kinds of things from the beginning. Just in case there's people here that can just instantly recognize that, and then they can go on from there. And everybody else benefits too, even if only in a way that they don't recognize immediately. And then we have a lot of other kind of practices where you get to play with stuff like puja and do mantra and visualize something. And those are the kinds of practices we do when we can't instantly recognize, when we need to go a more step-by-step way where things are slowly eroding. Our tensions are slowly eroding. So this tradition includes all those kinds of practices, but we actually start everyone with this opportunity to instantaneously see what's happening. Right? So it's a little bit different. So we don't say that integration only comes after 45 or 50 years or 50 lifetimes of practice. We actually start integrating right from the beginning. And that's why the practice of community is so important. The community of Jayakula is a practice of integration. And when we talk about integration in terms of a community, we're talking about integrating the view into our daily lives. The view is what I'm talking about right now. What do we think about what it means to be a human being? What is the nature of reality? What is the largest context in which we're practicing? It orients us towards our practice so that the fruits of our practice are in line with that. And so when we talk about our community, we talk about how can we practice integrating the view into our daily lives? How can we remember to be in the state of our practice? There are an enormous number of people here, enormous, a minutely enormous number of people doing a lot of seva or service. And I love what Swami Lakshmanju, a 20th century Kashmiri Pandit, taught about this. He said, seva or service is not offering to do stuff for your teacher or community. That is not seva. Seva is being in the state of your practice unbrokenly. When you are in the state of your practice unbrokenly, then whatever you do is of service. Right? It can't help but be of service if you're in the state of your practice. So we practice this from the very, very beginning. The relationship between seated practice and integration is that seated practice gives us a chance to discover that which we have to integrate. That which we have to integrate with. It teaches us how to integrate. So it gives us a zone where we can just focus on that recognition and on opening our senses and our mind. with relatively fewer distractions until we don't need to do that, because ultimately there are no distractions. The only distraction is our karma. Our distraction is our forgetting of our real nature in various ways that we forget it. But there's actually no distractions in the world. There are only distractions in our karmic conditioning. And so once that conditioning is relatively relaxed, we let go of a lot of that conditioning, then we can integrate very naturally without so much effort. Ma said, effort turns into effortless being. So we put in that effort to recognize and remember and integrate, and then eventually it becomes our new normal, and we don't have to put in so much effort anymore. Jayakula is a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. We are based in Portland, Maine and Portland, Oregon. Visit jayakula.org to explore more of our offerings.